Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for today's SONAR 301. Today, we're going to be having Jesse Cohen go over our air cargo indices and some of our new features that we released on our 5.0.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jesse Cohen. Thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction. By way of introducing myself, I spent about 30 years in the airline business with 3 different airlines. Most of my career was with United Cargo based in Chicago. That is where I currently live. I also spent about 3.5 years with 2 different foreign flag airlines, where I got some really good exposure to flying freighters. And prior to joining United, I spent 6 years in Houston in the freight forwarding business. So today I'm going to spend some time on the sonar features we have for air cargo. And I'm going to start really with the features that we introduced last week at FreightWaves Live in Chicago that touch on air capabilities. So bringing up our first screen here, which is a map screen. We did a lot of map enhancements within Sonar 5.0. We brought in a lot of ocean vessel information and port information. And we've, on the air side, we've introduced a lot more information about airports and detail on that. We've introduced aircraft locations and some pricing information on certain lanes. And I'm going to go through all of this. And we're continuing to build on this and enhance on this. So essentially, this is our first really big leap forward with live air cargo data. And what we're going to bring up initially are the airports. And down here on the left, going to points of interest. It's clicking it over here a little bit slow this morning, but you can see we've got airports and seaports. You want to toggle into the airports. We already have selected the OACT, which is our outbound air cargo tons. That's metric tons per week of capacity that is available out of each airport. We have other metrics as well, but what we've selected here are the OACT, the outbound air cargo tons metric, and I click submit. And now I have a lot of dots of varying sizes that represent airports that we can click on and get some information on. Over here on the right, we have a breakdown from very, very large to very, very small in terms of the outbound air cargo tons that are available. Over here, if I pull the map over to Asia, you can see Hong Kong, which is the largest airport for cargo in the world, is really represents that large dot of 76,000 tons a week. You can see Dubai over here is a little bit smaller dot, and you can get a sense for some of the large airports that we have here in the US. And what we can do is hover over those airports. Yeah, so we can hover over those airports. And if we click on the airport, we will get really a tremendous amount of information that's really coming out of our capacity data, inbound tonnage capability, outbound tonnage capability, tonnage on passenger flights, tonnage on freighter flights, and really provides some good basic information about the capacity in and out of major airports and even smaller airports globally. This is capacity that is passenger wide body capacity and passenger and freighter capacity. So we're capturing both the passenger and freighter capacity that is filed with the OAG, the official airline guide, and then we look at that and we develop further capacity modeling information, and that's what we are presenting here on the maps. So putting that airport information aside, the next metric we're going to look at are lanes. And what we have are the ability to look at our Drury air freight rates, and I will go into this in a little bit further detail, but what we essentially have is the ability to map about 65 different lanes globally, and show the latest rate information. So looking at specific lanes, if I wanted to look at, say, New York to Dubai, and I wanted to look at another lane out of New York, I could compare them, or I could overlay them. So here's New York to Frankfurt. And submit that. And now you can see we have from JFK Airport, we have two red lines, one headed to Frankfurt, and you can hover over that as I'm doing today, and you can get a sense just visually of the rate per kilo, which is 80 cents a kilo. My hand's a little bit unsteady here, so it's going on and off. And then the Dubai lane is about $1.25 a kilo. So you have the ability to portray certain lanes on a map. You may want to do that for various presentation purposes, but there's a lot of nice functionality here. The last area that I'd like to show in terms of our maps is in vehicle traffic. And this gives us the ability to map aircraft locations and submit that. And now we have basically a huge number of dots across the globe that are in various shades of yellow and orange and various sizes of aircraft that we can, essentially drill down on and get aircraft information by hovering over the area, hovering over the aircraft. I'm going to try to find one where I can get the entire information hover into the screen here. This happens to be the aircraft I've hovered on is a United flight. It's UA 122. It shows the departure time, which is 8:20 in the morning, your scheduled arrival time at 8:50, and the estimated arrival, which is pretty close to the scheduled arrival time. It's going from Washington Dulles, IAD, to London, Heathrow. It's a 757-200 airplane, and it's traveling at 460 miles an hour. So you have the ability to essentially look at, the level of congestion around an airport. You have a sense of, flights coming in and flights going out. And we're going to be building on this functionality and working with our data science team to improve the level of information to enhance this metric even more. So now I want to move over to some of the metrics that we've introduced over the past couple months prior to FreightWaves Live. And the first one really are our pricing metrics. And these are some of my favorite metrics because for me, as a person working in air cargo, they really provide somewhat at a glance some really high-level major market trends. They're very current information, and they let me assess a little bit about the health of the industry. So the first one is our TAC index, our Transportation Air Cargo Index that I have up on the screen. And there are three markets I'm covering here. One is Hong Kong to North America. The second is PVG, which is Shanghai to North America. And the third is Frankfurt to North America. So the Hong Kong is the blue line. And if you look back a year ago, it was really just coming off that very, very large rate high. It went up to as high as $5.50 a kilo. A lot of demand. There was a lot of ocean freight demand. This was a lot of that, that tariff stocking that went on that really drove the industry in the last half of 2018. And air really enjoyed a benefit as well. But we can see that really it's been pretty much, even Steven in a sense. It hasn't really gone up very much. Fourth quarter is typically the peak quarter for air cargo. here we are already halfway into November. We've got a little bit of a bump toward the end here, but the last week is, it fell off basically from $4 to 381. So we're in a very, very shallow peak season. Not much has gone on, just a little bit of a bump. So for me, this says that, we're looking at weekly metrics. This is last week's information, and the market actually slipped. So, good read on what is really one of the top markets in the world, out of Hong Kong to North America. Right below it in the green is Shanghai to North America. Typically, it follows the Hong Kong line pretty closely, but it too has been fairly soft for most of this year. We really only started getting this data at the beginning of 2019, but I can tell you in 2018, Shanghai rates were also much higher. So it's gone up a little bit in this peak season since really the earlier part of October, but it's certainly not up as anywhere near where it was last year. These lines are essentially trending pretty much in line with where they were in 2016, 3 years ago. And then the last line, Frankfurt, is really at a very depressed level. It's about the lowest it's been in over 2 years at euro 63 per kilo. And this is one that really indicates the softness of the European market to the US. A lot of this is the weakness in automotive traffic. This reflects the German economy somewhat on the verge of recession. So for me, for someone who looks at air cargo and wants to know something quickly about the health of air cargo, looking at these three really kind of help, get an initial judgment of what's going on. So the beauty of this particular index, the TAC index, is it's weekly. It's a blend of spot market activity and contract rate activity, and you get a pretty good major market look from very, very large markets. So we have another index, which I alluded to earlier, which is our Drury Air Freight Rates Index. And what we've pulled up here are 3 US markets. Again, with Drury, we have about 65 markets globally. Now, Drury is a little bit different than what we saw just a few minutes ago with the TAC. It really reflects contract rates only. It doesn't necessarily reflect the spot market. It's a monthly index, so there's a bit of a lag. And it does tell us, how airlines are pricing, major lanes and, sort of what kind of contract rates they're willing to offer on an ongoing basis. But certainly there can be differences week to week to the spot market, and there's a fair amount of air cargo that moves in the spot market. So this is one way of looking at the market. In some cases, I believe out of Asia, we have both Drury and TAC. So we're able to actually look at both of those and see how they compare with one another and determine what the gap is between the spot market and the contract rates. But with Drury, we have a lot more markets. We have the ability to get more specific. Here we have 3 rates out of the US instead of a North America composite. We have JFK, New York Kennedy, we have Chicago O'Hare, we have Los Angeles, all going to Amsterdam. And we can look at the ups and downs of this index over time from a month-to-month basis, and get some sense of where the market is overall. This is for general cargo, and it's based on fairly large shipment. It's a 1-ton general cargo weight break. So basically, smaller shipments might be higher priced than this on a contract basis. Perishable cargo or other specialty cargo, valuable cargo, pharmaceuticals, other things that move by air freight would typically tend to be higher than this by some percentage, depending on the carrier. But this is a nice index to use because it's global and because it gives us a sense of difference between the markets in the West Coast, the East Coast, and the Midwest. So now I want to move on and talk about some of the capacity metrics that we have in SONAR. And this is one of the metrics that was feeding the OECT was feeding the map just a few minutes ago that we looked at. This is the outbound air cargo tons for JFK, for New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. And this is tons per week of capacity. And what we have in blue is the total between passenger wide-body aircraft and freighter aircraft. And we have then the breakdown in green. We have just the passenger aircraft. which, as you can see, is most of the capacity is in the passenger fleet. But then in the purple down toward the bottom, we have weekly capacity for freighter aircraft flying out of JFK. The unique thing about this particular metric is that it is both backward-looking and forward-looking. We have in the dotted line 12 weeks going forward. So the area that's essentially, to the east of December, so to speak, is all forward-looking, and it's forward-looking for all of those metrics. And it gives folks that work, that pick up. If you're in the trucking business and if you're picking up at airports or dropping off at airports, you get a sense for, was overall capacity expanding or contracting? Is freighter capacity increasing or decreasing? And the significance of that is, freighters and the airline freighters essentially are flying between 60 tons of capacity and 130 tons of capacity, depending on the aircraft type. So when those aircraft land or take off, they generate a lot of cargo, and they have a lot of potential to carry, full truckloads that need to be carried beyond the airport to an inland destination or from an inland origin to that airport. So when I see freighters growing, I'm thinking there's going to be greater trucking potential, especially more full truckload potential. When I see passenger flights growing, typically a passenger aircraft, depending on which one it is, 10 to 15 tons is a good planning number for how much it can carry. And that of course, is how much it can carry after passenger baggage. Some aircraft can carry less. They have weight restrictions. There are a few that can actually reliably handle more, but 10 to 15 tons is a good number. So in many cases, passenger aircraft will be carrying smaller shipments, more suitable for LTL. But in passenger hubs like Newark or JFK, even passenger airlines that have big hub operations, because they have so many flights, can generate full truckload demand to certain points, to larger points. So, for me, passenger growth and freighter growth offer certain clues as to the potential. Is it going to be more full truckload or more less than truckload growth? Of course, freighters also have more flatbed cargo because they can take longer pieces, especially 747 that can take pieces through the nose. So you have potentially more variety of demand around trucks when freighters are flying into an airport or out of an airport than with passenger airlines. Both, of course, passenger and freighter aircraft can drive reefer demand. So again, the beauty of this particular metric, which is updated weekly, is that it has schedules going out 12 weeks and schedules going back, I believe we've got this back to 2018. So you can get a sense for, when capacity is going to go up and when it's going to come down. Typically, passenger capacity goes up. You can see the mild rise in the summer in New York because additional flying is, a lot of it's transatlantic flying. There's additional frequencies to major markets like London, Frankfurt and Paris that are, hot tourist spots. But you get a lot of additional flying into points in Eastern Europe that are really seasonal, or, secondary places in Italy that people want to go visit. So these all represent additional opportunities for trucking and other services in and out of airports. So the additional ability that we have with the OACT data, and I should note that we also have the ability to show this data into New York. So into New York by freighter, into New York by passenger, and into New York total. And those figures are typically very close to one another. But we have the ability to look at lane level detail. So here we have Chicago to Frankfurt in blue, and this is by freighter capacity going back basically a year, and again, going forward about 12 weeks. And we have the ability to overlay on that the passenger capacity. So the freighter capacity is OACTF, and the passenger capacity is OACTP. So passenger versus freighter. So you can look at a particular airport and determine, is this airport primarily served by freighters? Is it primarily served by passenger flights? If you happen to be working for an airline that primarily is serving Germany. You can get a sense for maybe where German growth is going to be in and out of an airport. So this gives you some points to help plan your market and commercial strategies for an airport or for a particular customer that happens to have a certain niche. Again, we can see ups and downs in flying. You can see that freighter flying that very last week of December drops off sharply. That's a very low shipping week. And you can see the passenger capacity even drops off a little bit between Christmas and New Year's. So this is the ability to look at lane level detail. We have 7,700 lanes in here. Again, passenger wide bodies and freighters. So there's a lot of detailed information here. So one of the things that I like to look at is, what's Chicago doing versus Atlanta versus JFK versus Los Angeles and, Dallas and Miami, which are really your big gateway airports. So if you're a national service provider in the trucking business or other businesses, and you want to look at, is Chicago growing? Is New York shrinking? Is another airport growing? Rickenbacker Airport, which is located between New York and Chicago and Columbus, Ohio, is a freighter airport that it markets itself as a less congested place to do business. You want to be able to follow trends and catch indications of where there may be airports growing and shrinking, and then being able to follow up on that. So these are things that I tend to follow that may be useful for you as well. So moving on to our wait time indices. So what we have done at FreightWaves is look at national wait times across essentially all industries. But we've also segmented this into seaports and airports and a variety of other verticals. And within the airports, we have about 20 different airports that we have tracked wait times, truck wait times on a weekly basis. And this really kind of goes back to early of 2018. So we can look at trends, when we get into a peak season or high demand season, or wait times going up. When we get into a slow season, or wait times going down. Are certain airports habitually worse than other airports? Are certain airports habitually better than other airports? Are there certain strategies, if you were serving those airports, that you may want to consider in your pricing? So what we've done, of course, is geofence the entire airport, and we are capturing the movement of, telematics equipped trucks and trailers, and measuring how long they're in the airport locations. And essentially what we've got is, the ability to compare. These are 4 very large gateways that typically have generated a lot of industry complaints about truck wait times. So you have Atlanta, which is not necessarily the largest cargo airport. It's a very important cargo airport, but up until earlier this year, it was over 100 minutes. It was one of the highest wait times of any airport or any major airport in the country. But you can see it's made improvement, and it's bounced around a little bit, but it's really, considering that volumes are not that high, it still has made significant improvement over where it was earlier this year. The Los Angeles line, the blue line, really shot up in May. Typically you get into some peak perishable season at that point in the year, but has also come down as of late. It was running roughly 100 minutes for most of the summer and into early fall, but has fallen down below 100 minutes. And then you get into airports that, where you get into a lot of infrastructure and congestion, like New York Kennedy, and has, you have a lot of bouncing around there, including a couple weeks ago, it was over 110 minutes average wait time, and then fell back down last week. And then Chicago O'Hare, which is the purple line, up and down, but typically a little bit more consistent. So these are some of the things that you may find useful tracking if you're serving these airports. We also have the ability using our tree map functionality to provide national detail on latest week for all of the airports that are under measurement. And the change that is shown is in the percentage is the change versus prior week. Um, so it shows you the week to week change. We also have the ability to show change versus last year, change versus 2 weeks ago, and to provide a few other indications. Here we have daily, weekly. This again is a weekly metric. So you're going to have weekly, 2 weekly, monthly, and yearly, and the ability to look at how airports are stacking up. Of course, with the tree map, the airports on the upper left of the screen are the airports with the highest wait times. So you have George Bush in Houston generating 109 minutes, which is it's red because it's worsened. It's 91% over the previous weeks. And then airports on the far right, in the lower right, such as Washington Dulles, Dallas, and Rickenbacker Airport, that are generating the lowest values between 30 and 47 minutes. And of course, green means wait times are getting lower, and red means wait times are getting higher. So this is a sort of a nice snapshot that's helpful to look at, and again, is something to take into account in planning how you're serving and pricing pickups and deliveries at airports. Are there any questions, Christine, on the line?
Now, if you all have any questions, you're able to drop them either in chat and Q&A, and Jesse is able to answer those for you live on air. We'll stay on for just a couple minutes in case there's any questions. Great, I don't see any questions. So thank you all so much for attending our 301 webinar today. Jesse, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. If you guys do have any questions that come up later, please feel free to reach out to your customer success manager or email sonarsupport@freightwaves.com. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.